Hello, everyone. I was wondering, why would so many people come to a soft skills talk? Like, come on. There are at least 3 proper talks happening right now, so yeah. But I think I get the answer. You want your after-lunch sleep nap, so I will try to speak with a proper, calm, soothing voice to put you in the right mood. Yeah, but thanks for coming. I appreciate that. Let's talk about talking. So, what do we do as software developers? We write code. We sometimes maybe even test that code. Sometimes we may even design something like the architecture. We generally solve problems, right? But then we talk. We talk with our fellow developers about the code we have written. We talk with them or QAs about how we have tested it. We talk about the architecture we have designed. We talk with the product about the problems we have solved. And then I realized that we talk quite a lot about all those activities. Like, we talk a lot about writing the code, we talk a lot about testing, about the architecture, about problem solving, but we almost never talk about the talking. And hence, this talk. Originally, I wanted to share a couple of tricks with you. I wanted to teach you some principles of effective communication, but then I realized I'm trying to fit a few days workshop into a presentation. So I changed my goal. My goal for this talk is to make you a little bit more aware of all the talking that we do as software developers. Then I wanted to introduce myself, but I also realized that that's not important. It doesn't really matter. What does matter is I read a lot, and some of the books I have read were about psychology in general and communication in particular. The next thing you need to know about me is that I talk a lot, and what's even worse, I don't know when to shut up. If you ask my manager, he will tell you that most or basically all of my failures as a software developer were related to communication. And I decided, okay, it's time to step up the game. I don't like to fail, so let's fix it. I like to think about myself as right now as an average communicator, but at the same time, I'm pretty decently communicating software developer. Like, you know, the baseline is not exactly high. Okay, so what is communication? Some of you may have heard about the Shannon communication model. It's coming from information theory. It's pretty theoretical. Typically applies to machine-to-machine communication. So you have a sender that produces a message gets encoded, decoded, received, end of story. Now, what does it mean for human-to-human communication? There is a thing you want to say. You have some idea, you have some thought that you want to communicate. And then you wrap words around that thought. Okay? So you formulate a message, you transmit that message, the other side hear it, and then they decode it in a sense that they understand something. They think about what you wanted to say. Okay? So this is communication. Now, the goal of communication is to make those two sides equal. So the thing you wanted to say is the same thing that the other side understood. And this is hard. Okay, but enough of theory. Let's talk a little bit about more practical problems. Who ever had to estimate something? Please, raise your hand. Perfect, the whole room. Now, how many of you had issues coming out of that? Yes, almost the whole room. And my take is that this is a communication problem. And here's an example. Someone comes let's say product manager comes and asks when this will be done. And the developer answers in about a week. Okay, everything clear? No, not really. What happened, or what might have happened, is that the PM understood it will be in production in a week. And what developer wanted to say is, if I start to work right now and drop everything I'm doing, and I don't take any operational requests and skip all the meetings, then maybe in 1 week I will open a pull request and maybe it will be running in stage. Okay? I hope you see the difference between those two understanding of the same phrase. So this is a communication concern. So the goal of estimates is to give a number, a value that has the same meaning for the both sides. But before we can do that, we need to understand why the other side needs it. Okay? There is plenty of reasons someone might want an estimate. There might be a promise made to someone, be it regulators, users. There might be a market opportunity to catch. There might be some internal planning, or not even planning, but like they just need to pick a next item to work on. Okay? So prioritization. More often than not, there will be exactly no reason to ask for an estimate. Someone just thought that he will ask a question. So you need to know that to be able to give a proper answer. So now, how to fix that? My solution to that particular problem is to be very, very explicit. When you're asked to estimate, this is what you can do. Tell explicitly what you're estimating. Tell what is the developer days that you assume this is going to take. What is your uncertainty factor? Like, almost every task is different. Some are well-known, some are full of unknowns, so quantify that. Then say, what is the assumed developer assignment and developer availability? Meaning, like, I have 2 developers, but one of them has a week of holidays and the other one is only assigned half time to this project, right? All those things are critical to estimate a date. And then repeat, so what will be delivered by when. So this is some historical estimate of mine as an example. Like, yes, this is 55 man-days of work. It's uncertainty 1.2, so we multiply by that. We have 1 developer, 4 days a week. End of story, we have a date. Okay? Now, if someone disagrees with that estimate, they have plenty of space to point with what they disagree. So if they disagree with the raw estimate, they can say that. Maybe they disagree with the uncertainty factor, and they thought, okay, there are no unknowns there, right? And then you can have discussion about that. Maybe there is a misunderstanding about the developer assignment. They thought that the whole team will be working on a thing, and you thought otherwise. So, yeah. Now, a side topic, estimate versus commitment. And this is something I want to put very special attention to, because those two matters a lot. Estimate is a purely theoretical thing. And teach that to your stakeholders, to your product managers, to whatever. Like, if they ask for an estimate, this is an estimate. It doesn't mean anything. Okay? It's a prediction. Now, if they want to have something by particular date, they should ask for commitment. And this is something much more serious that needs much more consideration and probably a different process. So generally, words matter. Sometimes they don't, but as in this example, they do. Okay, we're done with the estimates. Now let's talk about problems during implementation. The first one is business discussions. And here, what I want to share is that it's part of your job to be understood. And how can you increase the chances of being understood? you don't use technical terms. So if you talk with business, you don't words like commit, pull requests, replica, Kubernetes, cluster, high availability, resilience, whatever. No, those are not the words that the business typically operates with, right? And this brings us to the very important thing that will show up during this presentation a lot: adjust content to your audience. Okay? The next thing, code comments. I expect you never thought of code comments as a communication concern, but comments are messages to someone reading the code in the future. Okay? So what do you want to say is, and how you say it is important. So to do that, you need to understand your audience, you need to understand what the person in the future might need. And then this is why we typically go with why, not what, meaning the code is there, but the person in the future probably don't have the context why we did what we did in the particular way. And a side comment to that, humor is valuable. I strongly encourage you to make funny comments. I honestly love them. Whenever I see one, it makes my day better. So just put jokes in the comments. It's really healthy. Error messages, and those are yet another message into the future. You write a message today, and someone will read it tomorrow. And you have to understand what will be useful for them. And of course, operation unsupported is a valid message, but you probably see that it's not exactly useful. Now, if you say, can't update address of an inactive user, now this is probably much more actionable. Okay? Next thing, breadcrumbs. You will have to investigate things. You will have to understand why certain things were done in a certain way, so-called code archaeology. And if you have to do that, it's enormously beneficial to get breadcrumbs. What are breadcrumbs? Basically links to everything. Links to Stack Overflow, links to Jira issues, link to GitHub, Slack conversation, anything you can think of. Just link things together. So if you start in one place, it's easy to rebuild the historical context, because it will be lost. That's for certain. Okay, another thing. Building in the open. And this one is quite controversial, I could say. But generally speaking, you never know who might be interested in the things you're doing. You don't know who might be affected. You don't know if you're not missing some information or context. Now, if you stay silent, do your job, and then come up with results, you expose yourself to quite a lot of risk. Now, you can mitigate that risk if you build in the open. What does it mean to build in the open? Basically, use channels instead of direct messages, right? Or write meeting notes or stuff like that. Like, just let information flow so as many people as possible can know what you're doing. Okay? This is a little bit more complicated than that, but we'll come back to this. Okay? And then, connected thing, keep people in the loop. And this is what I like to say, my fellow developers, is if you're irreplaceable, you failed at your job. Our job is to write maintainable software. If you're the only person that can maintain it, and you're not there, the software is not maintainable. Okay? So just keep people in the loop. Okay. Now, topic of coordinating releases. In a small environment, small company, this might be pretty simple. Maybe release means a deployment for you, but it's likely that it does not. Typically, deployment happen all the time, but then releases are more coordinated, and then they involve multiple different parties. front-end, back-end, legal, compliance, operational, treasury, like marketing. A lot of people might be involved in releasing a new feature. Okay? And then, if you're lucky, you have a dedicated person who takes care of it. This can be a product manager, project manager, whatever. But sometimes, especially in a startup environment, this might be the developer handling the feature. This depends a lot on the company culture. So how do you do that? You just throw a message with a bunch of emojis and the people responsible for different things and update that message as things are done. Okay? You don't need anything more complicated than that. Let's go forward. Okay, now pull requests. We are the pull request authors. Our job is to get the pull request reviewed, accepted, and merged. The first problem is finding the reviewers. How do you find the reviewers? You look for concrete people and as many as you need, but not more. What does it mean? If you need 1 approval, look for 2, maybe 3 people. If you need 2 approvals, look like for 3 or 4 people. Why? Because there is something called diffusion of responsibility. The more people are assigned the job, the bigger the chance that everyone will think someone else gonna take care of that. Okay? So don't assign PRs to the whole teams. Put a deadline. Okay? Not a strict one, but say explicitly by what date you want this to be reviewed. Like communicate your plans to your teammates so they can act and respond accordingly. So if you need this reviewed, if you want to have this reviewed by Friday, then your teammates will either try to review this by Friday and everyone is happy, or they will tell you that they cannot do that because they are very busy and then you can find someone else. Okay? Still better outcome than just waiting for the review to happen blindly. Okay, so a small example. You can just throw a link to the PR, or you can mention a specific person and say that you want this to be reviewed. You want to merge it by Thursday morning. Okay, the next thing. If you want your PRs to be reviewed, make it reviewer friendly. The best way to make it reviewer friendly is make it small. Unfortunately, I continuously fail on that. I have a suspicion I'm biologically incapable of creating small PRs for some reason. So I had to figure it out and mitigate. So how can you mitigate that? Okay. How do you mitigate that? You can write a description on the PR, but what is important about the description, it cannot be long. The more you write, the lower the chances someone will read it. So write as much as you need, but not more. Highlight the most important places in the code. So if you have modified like 100 files in a kind of machine way, but then there are 1 or 2 files that are actually important, put comments on those files to focus attention of your reviewers there, like pinpoint what is worth reviewing. Okay? This increases the chances that they will spot something there. Write down what you still intend to do with the PR, okay? Because maybe it's a draft and then, okay, you can label it as draft, but maybe it's ready to be reviewed, but you still plan to, I don't know, test it in staging environment or discuss something with someone or stuff like that. Like, just make it explicit. Another topic. I don't want to start the flame war between rebase and merge. I know that this is a hot topic, but I want to tell you why this is a communication concern. It is one because when you force push, this is what your reviewers see. This exactly same, whenever you rebase, they see exactly the same message over and over with each force push because Git loses track what has changed. Like, okay, maybe nothing has changed, but still, that's what they get notifications. This is what they see in GitLab, GitHub. So just if you care about Git history, do the rebase before or after the review is done. Okay, not when it's happening. Okay, we're done as an author. Now we are on the other side of the fence. Now we are the reviewers. We want to give a good review, whatever that means. And what's more important, we don't want to make more enemies that we already have. And the first thing is level of give a fuck. So not all comments are made equal. Some things are more important than the others. Sadly, there is no standard for that. So you can just figure something out. Just mention how important something is. So it's easier to ignore things. Next thing is better because this is actually standardized or like semi-standardized. There's something called conventional comments, and they are basically prefixes for pull request comments. Something can be a nitpick, it can be a praise, it can be a question, and you can make your intent clear by using those prefixes. Can be very, very useful in certain scenarios. Okay, my favorite point. Don't be a jerk. Okay, I know this is hard, but it is important. Software development is a team sport. We don't work in isolation, and we cannot be mean to each other. Okay, so what does it mean to not be a jerk in context of code review? If you find a problem, try to propose a solution. Obviously, you will not always have one, but even if you don't, say that. Okay, I couldn't figure out a solution, but maybe you can think of something. Okay, then if you see that someone struggles with a PR, like it's a second week and they address comment by comment and then it's not really going anywhere, spot it and offer some help. For example, pair programming. Then show empathy. No one wants to have an open PR for 2 weeks, okay? Maybe it was too big, okay, maybe it's still fault of the pull request author, but it doesn't matter. What matters is that they created a PR, they want to have it done, and they're not comfortable if it takes 2 weeks to review it, okay? So now try to work together to get it merged, okay? And how you can pick your battles. As I said, not every comment is important. Sometimes you have to let things slip. Like you have to let people fail. Okay, you raised an issue, you believe this will backfire in a week, 2 months, years from now, but then the other side don't agree, and sometimes it is important to let them go their way, okay? If you're on a senior position, then your job is to actually build a system in a way that even if something fails, the system stays alive, and this can be mitigated and fixed. So, yeah. Okay, we are done with pull requests. Let's talk about everyday communication about different things. And the first thing, hello. That was uncomfortable, right? A little bit. And that's exactly what you do if you write a single hello and wait for the answer without following with what you actually want, okay? So don't do that. If you need more explanation, go to that nohello.net, nohello.com and read it. But basically, don't start asynchronous communication with a single hello. And don't wait for the response. Another thing, people will forget what you said, they will miss the messages you have written, they will misinterpret those messages, They will misunderstand them, and this is perfectly normal. Okay? So what can you do with that? Repeat, repeat, repeat. Okay? So if you find yourself repeating something the first time, the second time, the third time, don't get angry, don't get annoyed, and accept the fact that this is normal. This is how people's brain works. The only thing you can do is to think about, what can I do to be understood a little bit better? How to mitigate those tendencies to forget, miss, and misinterpret messages. Okay? But don't get annoyed about repetition. This is normal. How do you get response? And we already talked about this in context of pull requests, but this is more general, applies to basically any question, any request, anything you want from someone. To get a response, there are those three things you can do. You target your messages, you explain why do you need something, and then you explain when do you need it. Okay? Targeting is simple. In asynchronous communication, you just point to the person who might have the answer. What is important, if you don't know who might have the answer, shoot blindly. Like ping someone that you think might know who knows. Okay? It's your job to get the answer, right? So do whatever you can to that, and just don't broadcast your questions or requests and hope for the best. Again, don't target it to many people because diffusion of responsibility. Explain why you need something. Why this is important? There is some very old, or rather old, psychological study done by Ellen Langner called Xerox study, when she was investigating how people behave when someone wants to skip a line in front of a copy machine. So there is a line, and someone comes and says, sorry, can I skip the line? I have this thing to copy. And then there was a very big difference in results in present and absence of explanation. And what is even more important is that the explanation doesn't have to make any sense. If someone comes and says, sorry, can I skip the line? I have to copy those two things because I have to copy those two things, it already improved the results. So give explanation for what you need. And then explain when you need it, by what date. Okay? Already explained, they will try to get it to you by that date, or they will tell you that they can't. And here is another example. You can ask, where can I find CPU usage metrics? Or you can ask, hey, I need to get CPU usage metrics of our servers. Not sure who can help me with this. Maybe Tiago? We are releasing a CPU-heavy feature on Wednesday, and I need to prepare the setup. Okay? I can guarantee you that one of those messages will have a much higher response rate. Okay? Now, other side of the fence. Give the responses you want to get. What does it mean? If you see a question and you don't know the answer, but you know who might have the answer, speak up. If you don't have time to do something, you were asked and don't have time, say this, and the other side can act accordingly. If you have time, but not exactly right now, also say that, so the other side know that you have seen that you will do it just a little bit later. If you started to look at the issue and you realized it will take you some time to come up with an answer, also say that so the other side know what's going on. Okay? Another thing. This might be a little bit uncomfortable, but as sad as it is, humans like smiles. Okay? I know this is uncomfortable truth, especially in Eastern Europe. But yes, we have to smile sometimes. That's how humans evolved as a species. And yeah, but what's equally important is don't overdo it. If everything is awesome and great, then nothing really is. So try to balance it out. And then the next point, adjust the tone. I was really considering if I should put this slide here, because this is probably one of the most tricky advice in the whole deck. But some messages have to be harsh. It's just very, very hard to know which of them. So try to default to being polite and friendly and smiley and all that things. But remember that it's not always the way to go. Okay, but put a lot of considerations before you decide to go harsh. Okay, now about asynchronous communication and platforms like Slack. Messages should be easy to scan. If you have a wall of text to communicate, or even like 2 paragraphs of text, you have to assume that people will not read them. The longer it is, the bigger the chance that someone will not read them. And you can try to preemptively mitigate that. How? Put TLDR at the top, like 1 sentence, or even better, half of a sentence of like, what are you talking about? So I can figure out if I actually care about your message. Bolden the essential points. So if I decide that I kind of care about the message, but I don't want to read it, show me the fragments that are actually important, so maybe I will change my mind, or not. Use bullet points. If you have a lot to communicate, let me read the first few words of each bullet point to see what you're trying to say. It's much easier that way than if I have to scan the wall of text. And then the last thing is, don't overdo it, because then your messages start to look like a clown, and you probably don't want that. Another important thing, call or a message. Another something a little bit uncomfortable, because meetings are costly, inconvenient, annoying, and sadly effective. There are certain things that are much better conducted over a call, and even if we as developers don't like them, they are needed. So try to balance and try to figure out what is a right thing for a Slack thread and what is a right thing for a call. Be gentle with pings. I told you a lot to target your messages, right? This means ping people that might have the knowledge you seek. The thing is, whenever you ping someone, they get notification, then they might be annoyed. Okay? It's still on them to manage their notifications. Like, they can snooze them if they need focus or whatever, but it doesn't mean you don't have to be gentle and just ping everyone all the time. And there is a more important thing here. You have a long thread. Like, you were discussing something for like 20 or 30 messages, and then you realized you need another person to make a decision. If you summon them to that thread, summarize it. Don't expect them to read this whole conversation from scratch. Okay, they might do it, but it's part of not being a jerk. Like, just be polite and summarize what you need from that person you're summoning. And that's it. We're covered the practical examples of communication in everyday life of software developers. So now let's spend a couple of minutes on talking about the principles. So the things you can apply to many different communication scenarios, concerns, problems. Okay. The first one is understanding. Whenever you communicate with someone, you need to understand what they want, why they want it, what they think, how they understand you, why they are asking for what they're asking, and so on and so forth. Don't take messages at the face value, but sometimes do. What does it mean? If someone asks when this will be done, they might be saying it's taking too long. But at the same time, they might just be curious why, when this will be done. Okay? And it's your job to try to understand which one it is. Okay, it's also their job to communicate effectively and make it clear. So, as I said, it's a team sport, but you have to understand the other side. And at the same time, you have to ensure that the message you send, in a general term, was understood. Like, don't be UDP, okay? Your job is to be understood. It's not enough to just say something. You need to make sure that the other side understood it the way you want it. Okay, our first friend, adjust content to the audience. You have to imagine how your message will be received and then adjust it accordingly. Once again, don't be a jerk, please, okay? Formalities, conventions, and smiles matter, unfortunately, and we have to deal with that. Language proficiency. It is less important than you think. Okay, if you use simple language, there is a chance you will not be super precise, but if you use too sophisticated language, you risk that you will not be understood, okay, by someone who is not a native speaker. So, if anything, try to default to simpler language and use the more sophisticated words only if necessary. Brevity matters. Okay, this is an important point, one of the most important ones. You have to make your messages, your text you write, everything as short as possible. Always ask yourself, is there anything I can remove? Because this will significantly increase the chance that people will read it. And only after they read it, you care about what will be understood. Okay, so you have to balance those things between each other. And this is especially important in documentation. My personal take is that no one reads documentation. Okay? People write documentation, but people don't read it. And how to increase the chance it will be read? It has to be short and to the point. Communicate in the open. We already talked about this, but it's important. Not only build in the open, generally communicate in the open. Because it's easier to ignore the message than to become a telepath. And this is tricky because this depends a lot on the company culture, how things are done in general. But theoretically speaking, it is possible to ignore a message. It is impossible to become a telepath, as far as I know. And this means you should try to not use direct messages for any kind of important communication. And this is hard. Communication in the open is not easy. It creates noise. It requires proper setup. Like if you now start to use channels for each and everything, you have to structure those channels properly. So there are right people in right places, so the noise is not too big. And this is generally not an easy thing. And even if you have a proper setup, people have a natural biological tendency for private communication, then don't want to be in the open. And that is fine. You just have to account for it and adjust and remind and stuff like that. Now, something to sum up. Effective communication, all the tips, all the tricks, all the patterns I have shown you, they require effort. Effort means time means money. Okay, so they cost, and sometimes cost a lot. So you need to know when it is worth using those tips and tricks and when not. So effective communication is not, or like tools of effective communication are not something that you will use every day in every single communication. Okay, some of them, yes, if they become a habit, but some of them you will use on demand. And then, the last thing. If you think that you know something about the communication, as I thought, go read that book, and you will learn that communication is something very much culture dependent. People from the US communicate much differently than the people from Europe, and the people from Europe communicate much differently than the people from Asia, and even people from Germany communicate differently than people from France. and think differently and stuff like that. So this book is exactly about that. I strongly recommend this one, but I have much more resources to recommend. You don't have to take photos. You will have a link on the very next slide to the slides. But I prepared some resources. I even tried to order them in the order of importance. So, yes, communication is everywhere. I'd like you to be more conscious of that. Thanks for listening. My name was Wojciech Pituła. You can find me on Twitter, on the corridor. The slides are on the link. Thank you. We still have a couple of minutes. Let's see if we have any. Okay, the first one. How about teaching other stakeholders our wording, like commit, PR, etc.? Yes, they will learn over time if they need it. This is important. Like, do they actually need these words? Okay, if you're talking with an accountant, they probably don't. You can phrase your messages without those words. Now, if you have a stakeholders with whom you talk a lot and organize processes and stuff like that, then maybe it's worth for them to learn the words. So it's very much, it depends a lot on the concrete situation. Which is better, estimates in days or in level of complexity? For a long time, I thought the level of complexity is more important, like you estimate in the story points or t-shirt sizes or stuff like that. Now I changed my mind a little bit, and the answer is it depends. And this goes exactly to the very first point. If you remember to the very first slide about estimate, understand what you're being asked for, why they need the thing. Because for prioritization, you just need level of complexity. But if you need to catch a market opportunity and release something by 1st of November, you have to have days. Okay? So it depends. How about using larger time units alongside uncertainty? For example, 4 dev weeks versus 18 dev days. Uncertainty can get lost in comps, numbers usually don't. Yes, that's correct. I also do that. I typically round up everything at some point. So it depends, case by case, but I think it's also a good practice. So you can put the uncertainty first, then multiply, round up, and give a bigger unit. Why not? Okay, the next one. For PR, you mentioned have concrete people. This could become bottleneck. Okay, having concrete people could become a bottleneck. Also, if all team can review, isn't it more in line with built in the open? It can be the bottleneck, but it's also should not be in practice. Like, the one thing is, I recommend asking with a margin, like 1-2 people more than you actually need. And then if you ask them specifically, they should tell you that they will not have time. If you combine that with a kind of deadline on your plans, then they will tell you, okay, I won't be able to review it, and then you pick someone else. So yes, they can be a bottleneck, but in practice, you mitigate that through other means. And if that isn't it more in line with building in the open, like some asking the whole team? Yes. Hopefully you have other means than pull requests to maintain this building in the open. Like you have stand-ups, you have some communication happening in channels, meeting minutes, whatever. Pull requests are really work items. Like it's better to assign work items to less person than more, and build in the open through other means. At least that's my take on this. Okay, and the last one, how to deal with aggressive communication from the manager or stakeholder side. Normally, I would ask you, do you want a short answer or long answer? The short answer is find a better job. No, seriously, like life is too short to work in bad places. If your company's culture is so toxic that manager or stakeholder is aggressive, you probably can find a better place. Okay, but I know this is simplistic and this is not always possible. So the next answer I typically give is talk with your manager, but this is not a solution if your manager is communicating aggressively. Then in that case, you can try to your skip manager, right? One level above and talk with them. Like, this is a culture problem. It's not a communication problem. Like, I don't think you can effectively, or that you should, as a software developer, build ways to deal with aggressive, toxic communication. It's like, no, your job is building software. If someone misbehaves, this is a company problem that has to be fixed by the management, not by software developers. Okay, so that's my answer to this. Okay, where is definition of task, of done, of task, sprint, etc. I don't know exactly how this is a communication concern. Like, it is, yes, we have to have a common nomenclature, common wording. So if that becomes a problem, you have things like Confluence, right? Like, you can document your definition of done. You can document a lot of other things. One of my favorite tools is the glossaries, like the ubiquitous language from domain-driven design. So document what words mean. Like, you have some words, they have a concrete meaning, document that, write a document that explains that, so everyone uses them in the same way. So the same thing you can do for the definition of done, of your processes and stuff like that. So I think that that is the answer. Okay, if that's it, thanks a lot.